What's going on YouTube? Bacon here bringing another video. This one going to be my Season 7 draft recap for the MWPA Venus Division. That's right, we are in the Venus Division this season. Having been promoted from Earth based on our strong performance there in the previous season, we did win the championship in the Earth Division. So definitely happy to be in the Venus Division this season. Get to play some even tougher competition this time around and hopefully continue to play well here in the MWPA. Definitely looking forward to this season for sure. Just kind of quick recap for those of you who don't know, the MWPA is a free draft league, so that means as long as it's available and it's legal in the format, you can draft it, as long as somebody else doesn't have it. Then yeah, that's a free draft. You can draft whatever you want. You don't have tier requirements, you don't have points requirements, nothing. And there's also free Z in this league, so you don't have to worry about, oh, I can only Z 3 Mons, or I can only Z this 1 Mon, or whatever. You can Z whatever you want on any given week. So lots of flexibility in team building here. Definitely one of the more challenging leagues that I've played in from a team building perspective, just because every team's got so many powerful threats and they can all be running Z moves and you just don't know. So really, really good league to be a part of. Really enjoyed my last season here, so I'm definitely happy to be back. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into the draft recap here. So looking at the number 1 pick, or excuse me, I should say, the way the promotion system and everything works, we do a pick draft first, so you select where you're going to draft in the order of 12 players, and then after that is the actual draft. So the way the pick draft part of it works is based on whether you were promoted or whether you were relegated or whether you stayed the same, things like that, new player, old player. KMJ will set KMJ who's in charge of the league will set the pick order for selecting where you want to draft. So I actually was selected to pick my spot first, which meant I had whatever of the 12 slots that I wanted available to me. And what I actually elected to do was go with the 2nd overall pick. I only did that because there were 2 Pokemon that I was looking at with my 1st overall pick, and I honestly was like pretty 50-50 on which one I wanted to use. I thought either was really nice, and I'd rather have just a little bit off the wheel so I can get just a little better of a pick on my 2nd round coming back. So I don't mind being slightly off wheel. What it allows you to do is say, okay, this guy who's in between me, maybe like 4 or 5 picks into the draft, you can normally start to do this. You can say, okay, this guy who's in between me here doesn't need this Pokemon, so I can just pick the other Pokemon that I want first, and then it's like you've essentially got the wheel anyways, because you're pretty certain that they're not going to pick what you're going to pick. So yeah, that was kind of my strategy going into the draft, was pretend I'm on the wheel for all intents and purposes, but just kind of peek over at Inselliga's team, who's got the number 1 overall pick. Just peek over at his team as I'm drafting to make sure he's not going to snipe me in between my picks. So yeah, with that in mind, I was kind of looking at 2 Pokemon, like I said. I've already used Tapu Koko, so I wasn't super interested in drafting it again, even though it is probably a top 3 Pokemon in the format. The other 2 Pokemon I was looking at were Celestina and Mega Latios. 2 things that, again, generally go pretty highly in most drafts and are obviously huge threats. What I elected to do was actually go with Celestina when it came around to me. So Celestina, I had the opportunity to draft in VPL Season 3, but I just wasn't confident that I could build a strong team around it in the VPL. It is a tiers-based system in the VPL, and that means that your team's generally going to be a little bit weaker. It's not to say Celestina is bad in the VPL, it's still a very good Pokemon there. But I felt like I couldn't get the right support that I wanted to pair with it, and in free draft you obviously can. And this Mon's a huge threat. Defensively, base 97 HP, 103 defense, and 101 speed def is amazing. Can switch in on various types, psychic types, steel types, ground types, grass types. Switches in on a lot of the offensive metagame, and can just really kind of sit there with Leech Seed, Protect, Leftovers, Recovery, things like that. So bulky Celestina is obviously a huge threat, but offensive Celestina is also a massive threat. Things like Autotomize plus Weakness Policy, Autotomize plus Z Move are definitely things that your opponent needs to be prepped for on any given week with Celestina. Just a really threatening Pokemon, gets great offensive coverage moves, gets Grass type coverage, Fire type coverage, Rock type coverage, Ground type coverage. It gets pretty much everything that you would need it to run a more offensive variant of it. And even the defensive variant can still run some tech coverage moves like Flamethrower to hit Ferrothorn, things like that, that are pretty useful to your team. So Celestina is just a huge monster. You can't really ask for more out of a 1st round pick other than maybe the ability to set or defog Stealth Rocks, which Celestina obviously doesn't get, which kind of sucks out of your Steel and Flying type. But Excuse me, sorry, needed some water. Yeah, that kind of sucks out of your Steel and Flying type that you're not getting Stealth Rocks and you're not getting Defog. But it's a Celestina, like it's a massive threat, and I've been wanting to use this Pokemon for quite some time, so I was glad to be able to select it here in the first round. Next up here, we've got Jetstream the Latios coming back from our Season 6 team with my Bulutran core. Latios, I did terribly with Latios in Season 6, like, I'll be honest. Didn't do a whole lot in the games I brought it to, and I only brought it to like 3 out of my 10 games, or something ridiculous for a Latios. Like, it should become way more frequently than that, but I just never really found good opportunities to bring it, or I never had the right set in mind or anything like that. So it really suffered on the team last season. I'm hoping I can use it more and use it more effectively this season. But yeah, we brought Latios back. I've already kind of spoken at length about the utility of Latios. It gets Defog, gets Memento, gets Tailwind, but it also obviously is a great offensive Pokemon with kind of Life Orb, Choice Specs, Choice Scarf, Calm Mind variants, Z-Move. Just a really, really threatening offensive Pokemon. It can technically be run defensively in any given week. If you have like a niche fighting type that you need to take on, you can run a bulky variant of Latios. It does get access to Roost and Recover. But Latios is just a great versatile Pokemon in the format. Kind of a consensus tier 1 type pick anyways, and it's a great way to start off my the pairing of my Dragon Fairy Steel Core with Celesteela here. Just a really nice 2-mon pairing there. Obviously it's a nice electric and fire resist for the Celesteela. It can help take on more fragile offensive type Pokemon with like a Choice Scarf set coming in on a predicted electric or fire type move. It can also absorb status for Celesteela because Latios doesn't care too much about getting burned, and Celesteela obviously doesn't care too much about toxic because it is a steel type. So Latios, I felt like, was just a really nice kind of way to start off the pairing with Celesteela. This actually wasn't my planned second round pick. We'll get to that in a second because I do draft it in the third round. But this is kind of what I was talking about before with being on the semi-wheel, where I can look at what Inselica's got on his team and say, he's not going to snipe me in these 2 picks, and just grab the other thing that he might snipe me on. That was kind of the idea with the Latios here. I thought, okay, he could run like Coco plus Latios, that's perfectly fair, but I didn't think he was going to run Coco plus my third overall pick here, so we'll get into that in a second. But Latios, I felt like, was just a really nice pairing with the Celesteela and the other Pokemon I'm going to grab here in a second, and I felt like I just couldn't give up the opportunity to grab it here in the second round. Next up, we've got Zeraora. So Digimon the Zeraora here. There's a typo on the slide. It says Levitate as its ability. It's actually Volt Absorb, which is fine. But Volt Absorb is obviously great for Celesteela. It gives me an electric immunity, which that thing only has 2 weaknesses to fire and electric. So picking up an electric immunity is really nice. Zeraora is blistering fast at base 143 speed. The only kind of relevant threats in the meta that'll be outspeeding it are Mega Aerodactyl, Mega Alakazam, and Mega Beedrill, I believe. And of course Choice Scarfers and Setup Sweepers and things like that. But Zeraora, just a really potent offensive threat, gets great coverage options. Of course, it is lacking the U-turn, it is lacking Ice Punch. If it got those 2 moves, this thing would probably be one of the best, if not the best Pokemon in the format, in my opinion, if it got those 2 moves. But at the very least, you can run like Tech HP Ice if you need to on a given week, and it does get access to Volt Switch for Momentum, which, while it won't work on ground types, will work on the bulkier grass types that tend to want to switch in on Zeraora anyways. It gets access to 2 forms of setup in terms of Bulk Up and Calm Mind, both of which can actually be very usable on Zeraora despite not having access to recovery moves. It does get Drain Punch actually on the physical side, but otherwise, like, it does have good enough coverage that you can run like Bulk Up 3 attacks or Calm Mind 3 attacks and put in some huge work. It forces people to bring Choice Scarfers, which Celesteela really appreciates because Celesteela is obviously a naturally very bulky Pokemon. It really appreciates things not being able to run like Life Orb, Choice Specs, that kind of stuff. If it can be switching in on Choice Scarf hits instead of Choice Specs hits, it's going to really increase its longevity as well. So I felt like Celesteela plus Zeraora is just a great 2-mon pairing. And with the Zeraora plus the Latios here, I'm kind of making sure that this team doesn't end up running way too much bulk and way too much like lack of speed, for lack of a better term. Like in my SSBL team, I drafted Mega Mawile with my first overall pick, which is a phenomenal Pokemon, but it's obviously very slow, and it's a Steel and Fairy type that is not particularly defensive, despite having a great defensive typing. So what that ended up kind of happening there is I drafted Mega Mawile, and then I drafted like a lot of slower stuff around it to help me take hits a little bit better. and then the team's just generally not very fast. So I wanted to not fall into that trap as much with Celesteela here, even though I don't want to force Celesteela into a bulky role every week. I wanted to at least have the option to run some speed and force my opponent to prep for my speed, as opposed to it being the other way around like it is in the SSBL every week, and OLT every week. I've basically been the slower team on all of those matchups. So, excuse me again. Yeah, Zeraora, I just think, is one of the best Pokemon in the format. In 8-Mon, it's absolutely busted. It's definitely one of, even one of the best Mons in 8-Mon. Top 5, I think, in 8-Mon, I would argue. But in free draft here, in 11-Mon, it gets a little bit of a decrease because more people are going to have options to deal with it and such, but it's still a very, very good Pokemon in the Draft League format. Like I mentioned, those kind of quality of life things with U-Turn and Ice Punch would help a lot, but it can still kind of deal with the coverage that it has available to it currently, and it's great mixed attacking stats plus blistering fast speed. So very excited to use this Pokemon. Had to prep for it multiple times. It's always a headache to prep for. Time to bring the headache to my opponents was kind of what I was thinking here. Next up here, we got Frogchamp the Greninja coming back from my VPL Season 3 team. Again, it's only Torrent Greninja here, but Torrent Greninja is more than enough. I think it's still a steal in round 4. Great speed stat again at base 122, and kind of a nice bridge between the Zeraora speed tier and the Latios speed tier. Prevents things from things like Tapu Koko from running modest versus me, for example. But Greninja's just a monster in Draft League. If we allowed Protean or Battle Bond, it's a huge monster, but Torrent is still very good because it gets access to pretty much every type of coverage that you would need. It gets access to Extra Sensory, Ice Beam, Grass Knot. You can run HP Fire if you're running Hidden Power. There's no reason to run any other kind of Hidden Power on Greninja, in my opinion, because it gets all the other coverage it would need besides Fire-type moves. So you can run HP Fire if you need to. It gets Low Kick for things like Tyrannitars. Gets Gunk Shot for Fairies and for kind of bulkier Grass types that might want to switch in on it. And in a free Z League, you've already got 4 Pokemon on this team that can all use Z moves very, very effectively. So definitely going to be kind of a headache to prep for those first 4 Mons for sure. This also gives me a Spiker and a T-Spiker. Celesteela really appreciates the hazard support for sure, especially T-Spikes. Celesteela is so bulky. If you're running a Leech Seed variant with Leftovers and Protect, and you've got T-Spikes up, you're really going to be wearing down your opponent quite quickly. So I wanted to get that option on the team, and kind of a semi-spoiler here is that the Grounded Poison that I was looking at later in the game, or later in the draft, excuse me, did not have access to T-Spikes, and I really, really wanted that. So Greninja here, just a really nice partner for the more offensive variant of this build that I can now run, but also just in general in the more kind of balanced approach with Celesteela plus T-Spikes can also support me in that respect. It's also offensively, like I mentioned, huge threat, gets great coverage options, gives me that Dark type that can make sure opposing Psychic types aren't going to wall my Latios really hard. I can get Greninja in and start to kind of break those down a little bit. Latios can weaken them, so Greninja can come and pick them off kind of thing. And also pressures opposing Ghost types as well, obviously, that would otherwise threaten the Latios. So Greninja here, just really nice partner. Gives me a little bit of priority as well with Water Shuriken if I need it. And just an absolute coverage beast. Really, really happy to have grabbed it on the team. Next up here is another good Z move user with Dwayne the Terrakion. So Terrakion's not a Pokemon that I've used in the Draft League format yet, but it's definitely, I don't want to say it's underrated. The thing is, in most kind of standard tier leagues, it'll land in tier 1, right? Which it should. But it'll land in tier 1, and there's other really good options in tier 1. Things like your Lotties, your Celesteelas, Tapu Kokos. All that tier 1 stuff is way more valuable than grabbing Terrakion, in my opinion. So you'll generally need to grab 2 tier 1s in that kind of league, which is usually pretty pricey, and then you have to take a lower tier Mega. I don't know, Terrakion's just very difficult to draft for me in a kind of VPL style type tier-like system. Gets a little bit more credit in points leagues where you can grab a few more strong Pokemon with it, but in free draft, man, you can put whatever you want around Terrakion, and it really doesn't need to be the star of the team. It can be on any given week. It certainly can be. Dual Dance Terrakion's a huge threat. Scarf, Banded, Focus Sash, Lead if you really need it to do that. Terrakion's versatile enough that it'll do what you need on a given week. And Rock plus Fighting type coverage with the ability to run Earthquake as well. You're not really going to need more coverage than that more often than not. Maybe you'll need Poison Jab sometime, but for the most part, Terrakion's just a huge beast. SDZ move breaks through pretty much everything that you'd need it to. Whether it's bulky ground type, you can run SD plus Close Combat with Z move, or if it's like a bulky flying type, you can run SD plus Continental Crush on your Terrakion. So it's a very nice kind of co-breaker with Zeraora, I'll say. Not that Zeraora is necessarily a breaker, but like Terrakion can break for Zeraora, because they kind of generally have some of the same checks, bulky grass types, bulky ground types. Defensively, they have some of the same checks. And even offensively, I guess. Bulky grass types, bulky ground types, faster grass types, faster ground types will kind of need to take hits from Terrakion that Zeraora could also be dealing out, and they can kind of break for each other a little bit and weaken each other's checks, and then potentially open up a door for them in the late game. But it's like Scarf Terrakion and I need Zeraora to break through something for it, or if it's like my Zeraora outspeeds their whole team and Terrakion just needs to break this really fat ground type like a Hippowdon or something, it can do that as well. So really potent setup threat in Terrakion. Does give me access to Stealth Rocks, which I hadn't previously had on the team, even though you don't really want to have to run Stealth Rock Terrakion, but also a very viable Choice Scarf or Choice Band type user on the squad. Next up here, we're bringing up back another favorite with Lilo the Comfey. I did have Comfey in the ABC in Season 1. Obviously, very good Fairy type with its Triage ability. Gives it priority Draining Kiss, priority Giga Drain. That's kind of its claim to fame. Calm Mind Comfey is obviously a huge threat that your opponent has to kind of be prepared for every single week. I did 6-0 once with Calm Mind Comfey in the ABC. I actually used it to straight up break through a Magnezone, which was kind of funny. But Comfey is like, if you're not prepared for Calm Mind Comfey, it's going to run you over. So you need to run Status, which it does get a run with Therapy for if it doesn't need the coverage. You need to run Phasing, you need to run Haze. You need to have some prep for Comfey, and Comfey doesn't need to be the star of this team. Like, I already got 5 excellent Pokemon in my first 5 picks. Comfey can really run a more support role if it needs to as well. Gets access to Leech Seed, U-Turn, Defog, Aromatherapy, I think Tailwind, things like that can also be very useful from the Comfey. So kind of a nice dual purpose here from the Comfey. It's not the Fairy type I wanted. I wanted a kind of a bulkier Fairy type like Florges or Sylveon to help me Wish Pass on this team. But I felt like Comfey still fit the bill pretty decently. Does take advantage of some of the Leech Seed recovery that Celestina can get to it, and the rest of the team can take advantage of Leech Seed recovery that Comfey can give to them. So kind of a nice pairing here to finish off my Dragon Fairy Steel Core. Not, again, like the Fairy type that I was looking at predominantly, but still a very solid pairing here, and I was pretty glad to get this Pokemon still. Next up here is Arcanine, who's a very good boy. I straight up stole this nickname from Jeff, not gonna lie, but Arcanine's just a really nice partner for Celesteela, and I kind of looked at my team 6 rounds in and was like, my team gets pretty much bodied by Mega Mawile. Like, I don't straight up lose to it, but it's not good, so I wanted to have something to check that thing for sure. And offensive steel types in general, I felt like it would be nice to have something besides the Celesteela that I'm going to be able to switch in on them. So Arcanine obviously has 2 great abilities with Intimidate and Flash Fire. Justified is really, you're not going to use Justified more often than not. But Intimidate and Flash Fire are 2 very, very good abilities. Intimidate obviously is going to help ease my switch-ins to some of my opponent's physical attackers. Things like I mentioned, the aforementioned Mega Mawile. But also the Flash Fire ability can come in pretty clutch there to give me that fire immunity for my Celesteela. I've already got the electric immunity in Zeraora, and I've got a good electric resist, well, decent electric resist in Latios. Give me that fire type switch in with the Arcanine here is really nice. You can run a bulkier set with like Toxic or Will-O-Wisp plus Morning Sun kind of thing, Rocky Helmet leftovers on the Arcanine, or you can run it more offensive if you want to. You can run Life Orb, you can run Choice Band. It does have a pretty decent physical attack stat at base 110, gets access to coverage moves like Close Combat, Wild Charge, Priority, and Extreme Speed. Just a really solid Pokemon in general. It's nothing too flashy, but I felt like it fit on the team really nicely here. And it gave me a little bit more bulk on the team. I did want some more Fairy Resists that weren't Celesteela to try and open the door for Celesteela to run offensive sets if it wants to. And I feel like Arcanine fit pretty nicely in that regard. Next up here is Falcon the Silvally. So at this point in the draft, I kind of realized I've taken 2 pure typings at this point with Comfey and Arcanine. I was kind of looking at getting a pure normal type anyways at some point. I was actually looking at Mega Kangaskhan for a little bit, but it doesn't get access to Power Up Punch. Obviously, it doesn't get access to Seismic Toss. That shit's broken. But it doesn't get access to Power Up Punch in this league either. And I felt like that was a little bit too much to warrant drafting Mega Kangaskhan. So I elected to go with Silvally here. Normal Silvally is really slept on, actually, because you could actually run an item on it. You can run Z-Move, you can run Choice Scarf, whatever. You can run a Berry. Like, you can actually play around with normal type Silvally and have it be useful. But you can also run, of course, any type that you need on the Silvally, which is kind of the bigger reason that I drafted this, because I knew I was going to have some typing holes. I was certainly not going to have all the typings available to me on this team. So if a particular typing has a good advantage against my opponent, Silvally does have the coverage to run whatever. So like if I need Silvally Steel because I don't want to run Celestina on a given week, like they've got a good electric type, but it's walled by, I don't know what I'm talking about. But Silvally, maybe Steel was not the best example, but giving me the option to run a typing that I don't have on my team, or kind of compound a typing that has a good matchup, I felt like was really, really important to have Silvally here. It does give me access to another pretty reliable defogger, I'll say, and Parting Shot support is really appreciated on this team. Not only is the team not super bulky to this point, outside of things like the Celestina, but also it's got a lot of setup potential on it. Celestina can set up, Latios can set up, Zeraora can set up, Terrakion can set up, Comfey can set up. Like, there's enough setup on the team to warrant running Parting Shot, I think, for sure. And this is probably the best Parting Shot user that's out there. I think the only other things that get it are Alolan Persian and Pangoro, if I'm not mistaken. I think that might be it for Parting Shot. So, Silvally, really nice kind of networking Pokemon on the team. Not going to be anything particularly flashy most weeks, but Parting Shot plus Defog and a couple moves is kind of pretty reasonable to expect from Silvally on most weeks, I think, and it can definitely hold the team together for a couple turns while I'm trying to get maybe my more offensive mons set up to try and sweep my opponent, or to just potentially help myself steal a wall something that wouldn't otherwise wall, but giving it to -1 kind of helps me out there. Next up here, we've got Battletoad, the Mega Venusaur. So this was the grounded poison that I was talking about that didn't have access to Toxic Spikes. But Mega Venusaur plus Celesteela is just a really nice core. This is an absolute steal in round 9. Mega Venusaur is a great Pokemon. Fills out a nice little fat core and great fairy resists with my Arcanine, Celesteela, and Mega Venusaur, which is amazing for my Latios, my Greninja, and my Terrakion that I have good fairy resists in the back. But Mega Venusaur, this was both a mistake and not a mistake. Like, Mega Venusaur, I definitely needed on this team. Like, at this point in the draft, there was really no other Mega that I was looking at. There was some potential for me to get sniped on Mega Venusaur, but I was pretty sure it wasn't going to happen. But at the same time, I was like, okay, this is way too valuable at this point in the draft for me to not get it. Like, if somebody did happen to snipe me, it was way too valuable for me to not end up getting it. So I kind of bit the bullet here and drafted Mega Venusaur before kind of a big pick shift, 20 picks before my next pick or whatever. And unfortunately that meant I did miss out on Donphan, which is another Pokemon I was looking at. I really wanted the Rapid Spin support from Donphan on this team because it would allow me to Hazard Stack without having to worry about getting Hazard Stacked back. But unfortunately we did end up getting sniped on the Donphan on the way back because I took the Mega Venusaur here. I kind of regret it because I do think I could have gotten both Donphan and Mega Venusaur, but in the sense that Mega Venusaur was more integral to this team's composition than Donphan was, I think it was still worth taking the Venusaur here, just to make sure I didn't get sniped. I'm kind of fine with that here, honestly. Taking Mega Venusaur here. Just a really great partner, like I mentioned, for Celesteela. Really good fighting resist, fairy resist, electric resist on the team. And it's thankfully not weak to fire types because of its thick fat ability. So, really cool Pokemon. Something I've been wanting to use for a little bit, actually, because I do tend to like more bulk-oriented teams, but I really don't like my walls to be super passive, and Mega Venusaur is certainly not passive. It has a base 122 special attack stat and a pretty usable base 100 attack stat to go with some pretty nice coverage options. Gets things like Earthquake if you need to hit a Heatran, for example. You can run HP Fire to hit things like Ferrothorn. Obviously gets Giga Drain, Sludge Bomb, Synthesis, Leech Seed. Just a really bulky Pokemon. It's also not kind of straight setup bait like some are. So, yeah, pretty glad to get Mega Venusaur in the 9th round. Again, I think that's definitely a steal for Mega Venusaur. So, definitely glad to grab it here in the 9th round. Next up here is Gligar. Swear to me, the Gligar. This, again, like I mentioned, was supposed to be Donphan. But Gligar, I think, still gives me at least the potential to remove hazards as well as set them. Gives me a nice bulky ground type to switch in on things. Obviously, the 4x ice type weakness is kind of concerning, but it does still have a pretty decent defensive typing, with only weaknesses being to water and ice. Obviously gives me another electric immunity on the team. I don't think you run Celestina without a ground type, so do have another electric immunity on the team and another ground immunity on the team. So that's 3 ground immunities on the team, which is great because my grass type does not resist ground. Something like Zygarde could potentially be a little bit more problematic, I guess, from that respect, but I do have other ways of handling Zygarde at the very least. So I felt like Gligar was kind of a nice pairing here. Really, really bulky Pokemon with Eviolite. You see that base 105 defense stat is massive when you add the Eviolite boost on there. I have used Gliscor pretty well in the ABC and in the SSBL. Obviously, Gligar's not exactly the same. It doesn't have the toxic heal recovery. You have to worry about your Eviolite being knocked off, but I think Gligar here in the 10th round, it's kind of a Pokemon that's more niche once you start to get down to these rounds, but I felt like it's just a really nice partner to have on the team. And I really needed the Stealth Rock support. I only had one Stealth Rocker to this point in the draft, which was Terrakion. And giving me another defogging option is always good as well. And lastly here, we're taking another run at Necrozma. So Necrozma was like, I had 10 Pokemon on this team coming into the 11th round, and I was like, I don't know what I want for my 11th round pick. I didn't have any plans. All the Bug, Ice, and Ghost types, which are the 3 types I'm lacking on this team, were pretty to me at this point in the draft. Like, I wasn't particularly inspired by any of them to say that warrants a draft pick. And Necrozma was a very good Pokemon, and it was still sitting there, so I was like, okay, I'll take round 11 Necrozma. Hugely potent setup threat, can run SD, can run Rock Polish, can run Calm Mind, can run Iron Defense, like, hugely, hugely potent, both specially and physically, offensively. But also can be a good defensive threat, gets access to things like Moonlight, plus Toxic, Stealth Rock. You can run kind of a bulkier variant of Necrozma to take on opposing fighting types. And having kind of that bulky Psychic type option is nice, because my Latios is obviously not particularly bulky, my Comfey is not particularly bulky. So it gives me a nice kind of fighting type check. And the kind of the dual Psychic I think works pretty well on this team. One's more offensive with Latios. Necrozma can be run offensively, but can also be run more defensively if I want to run both of them together kind of thing. I think Necrozma was just too good of a Pokemon to pass up here in the 11th round. Gives me another Stealth Rocker, which is great. I always kind of like to have 3 or more Stealth Rockers if I can. And Necrozma in the 11th round, again, is just too much of a steal to pass up getting. Even though it doesn't like necessarily add a lot to the team type-wise, I think role-wise it still fits pretty nicely, and can definitely put in some work this season. So hopefully I don't drop it again like I did in the VPL. I think I dropped it week 2 or something in the VPL that season. I was really not happy with my VPL Season 3 team when I started out, and wasn't super happy when it finished either in terms of the team itself. But hopefully I don't drop Necrozma this time. Like I said, it's kind of extraneous at this point, but it's also a Necrozma, so I was perfectly happy to draft it here and say that was a pretty decent draft here for the Villanova Victini. So yeah, that's the MWPA Season 7 Venus draft for us. We've actually already played our first week match. You guys will see weekly uploads as well for this. And hopefully you guys tune in for those and stick around for the rest of the season. Thank you guys very much for watching if you did to this point, and I hope to see y'all in another video later.